I'm at REIT Week 2010 in Chicago, and I'm joined by Patrick Sumner, Head of Property Equities with Henderson Global Investors. So Patrick, in your view, looking globally, which three markets do you think are in the best shape, and conversely, which three do you think are kind of at the bottom?
I think if one's picking specific sectors, it's offices, and it's offices in the financial centres, Manhattan, London and Hong Kong, where we're seeing some rental growth. And the three worst markets are quite difficult to pick because there are so many candidates. But I think you have to choose Japan in general because of the state of the economy and the demographic factors. You also have to think about Spain, and especially retail, where like-for-like sales growth is a negative 10% over the last year.
And what impact, in your view, do you think the financial situation in Greece is going to have, not just on Europe, but possibly the world?
Well, I think it's going to be limited to Europe. I think it's going to slow growth down, certainly in the whole of the Eurozone and possibly in the European territory. Clearly, it's going to have an impact on the currency. But it's not just Greece, of course. It's Spain, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, who are all in pretty grim shape. And we've just had some negative GDP figures out of Finland. So, you know, it's not just Greece.
And as a global investor, what do you think is the most important decision when you're trying to determine a global portfolio allocation?
There's no single factor that you can pick out as being paramount, but the way I think about it is that in the long term, you need to base your decisions on fundamentals. You know, clearly it's property market factors, economic factors that drive value. However, in the short term, because we are dealing with REITs that are a stock, you have to take into account investor sentiment, which may or may not be right.
And speaking of REITs, are you seeing more of a trend globally to property being held in public hands, like REITs?
Not yet, but we would expect over the next few years for there to be a flow of IPOs. IPOs of distressed property being held by banks or other organizations. And secondly, the REITs are in a better shape to acquire these distressed assets from banks and others than anybody else in the market because their balance sheets are in relatively good shape.
And what one trend, if you had to pick one, would you say has you the most optimistic about the global property markets?
Well, I think it's a lack of oversupply. You know, we are not in the position that we were in the early 90s where there had been a terrific overbuilding. We don't have an oversupply of real estate in the vast majority of markets now, and there is very little financing for new development. So I think that shortage of supply balanced with weak demand is probably an encouraging factor, relatively speaking.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
For REIT.com, I'm Matt Bishart.